Natural Resource Advisory Board meeting. Call to order. I'd like to make one small addition to the agenda. I've had several interesting meetings over the past few days, and I'd like to report on those. One about the ponds, one about Hawes Pond at the Route 6 interchange, and the other about eels. And then we'll go into the minutes and then go into the substance of the meeting. So without objection, let me make a few comments. Laura, were you at the ponds meeting?
I was, yep.
Yeah.
There were quite a few of us on those little Zoom icons.
Yeah, so Laura and I were at a meeting of the Gupaka Association. That's the Gull Pond Owners Association. And there were some interesting things. Andrew Gottlieb, who's the head of APCC, reported on the cyanobacteria testing that they do under contract with the town. And all of the Wellfleet ponds were rated as very low risk for cyanobacteria. However, at the same time, well, a couple of things at the same time. According to Andrew Gottlieb, fertilizer runoff is a big trigger for cyanobacteria blooms. And so I thought I would write to Gupaka and say, I hope that all of the abutters to any of our ponds minimize the use of fertilizer. Not only would it protect the ponds, but fertilizer and watering makes grass grow, and grass plus puddles are where mosquitoes hang out. So if you don't fertilize and you don't water, you get fewer mosquitoes and everyone will be happier. The other issue that came up is that the Cape Cod National Seashore had been doing water quality testing. And for the past 2 years, they haven't been able to do that. So without objection, I will write on our behalf to the Cape Cod National Seashore and ask that they renew testing, at least at gull, long, and duck ponds. Those would be, I think, our priorities.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus was that there were people at all the ponds who were willing to volunteer to help do the testing. So maybe
Okay, I'll put that in the, I'll put that in.
worth saying if they trained us, we could do it next summer for them potentially.
Okay, I'll put that in the note. Thank you.
Examples.
Something that came up pretty strongly, I was at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last night, is there was a big discussion about the plans for changing the intersection where East Main Street meets Route 6. But one of the issues there is that the Duck Creek water flow into Hawes Pond, which is just northwest of the intersection, has been blocked. And this, among other things, that there used to be fish in there, there used to be eel in there. So the Board of Selectmen were very anxious that this start again, that the culvert be changed. I talked to DPW this morning, and they were on board with that idea. So I thought I would just write a note to the Board of Selectmen on our behalf and say that we also support restoration of Hawes Pond.
And may I interrupt?
Excuse me?
May I interrupt? I'm Flynn.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not hearing you very well, Tom, so speak carefully.
True.
You're muted, Tom.
You have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Thank you. Now I hear you clearly. What was your
There
comment?
was a flapper valve there until the well asked them to correct it because
Boy, we got trouble here.
Yeah, we can't hear you well.
Tom, I'll follow up by email and find out what your comment is. The other thing that I heard is when we're talking about eels, I was told that Nancy Savetta, who is the shellfish constable, is also the eels constable. This came as a complete surprise to me. But it made me think that there are lots of elvers in the Herring River. We see them when we're counting herring in the spring. And we haven't been counting the elvers. There are ways to do that, so I'm going to propose to Nancy that we think about a way to do that, so we'll have another piece of information about the benefit of the Herring River. Not only is it lead to a birthplace for herring, but also for eels.
Good luck counting elvers. They're pretty small.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. And there's some equipment at Mass Audubon, the sanctuary here, where they do it.
Really?
There's a breeding ground for elvers in the Silver Springs Pond over at the Audubon. And there is a way. You don't just stand by the shore and go 1, 2, 3. That's for sure. You trap a certain number and actually count what's trapped, I think.
Well, you can see them as they go by, but you could never see all of them, you know?
They go by.
They go by that sandy part where it's like really light sand.
Hard to see them, but they are countable.
Well, they have this little, they have kind of a ramp next to the outlet to Silver Spring that they go up, and once or twice a day somebody counts the ones that are in there. I guess it's sort of a representative sample or something like the herring counts we do. But
I think that's something it's basically Friends of Herring River business. I think the Friends would undertake that. But I'd like Nancy to say that she thinks it's important.
Did somebody invite Nancy to join this meeting?
I didn't.
Okay, I didn't either. I don't know. I kind of assumed she would be here, but I guess not.
I will invite her for the next one if you think that's useful.
Yeah, so we were going to talk. Laura and I have been kind of following up with her a little bit, and I've been talking to her about the chapter on shellfishing for the harbor management plan. So I thought you might be able to share some stuff with us, but
let's make that on the next meeting, which will be about a month from now, and we'll try to organize it so she can join us at your invitation and Laura's. Tom, do you hear me now? Tom Flynn? You have to unmute yourself still. You're muted.
thank you. Just crashed. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. It'll be much more fun when we can get back together as real people, not images. Next thing on the agenda is to approve minutes from our last meeting on July 23rd. I've sent copies around. Are there any comments or corrections?
I thought they looked good.
they look good.
fine.
May I have a
Move to
motion?
accept the minutes. Do you
What?
need a motion to
Yes,
accept the
please.
minutes?
Yes.
So move.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Yes.
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 John? I think you nodded. Tom?
Aye.
Okay, so thank you very much. What I wanted to do next was just go over some of the key recommendations in that we might be thinking of for the harbor management plan. So I'll start first with Jim Falcone. Jim, as many of you know, is likely to become chairman of a new committee on coastal access issues. And at the Board of Selectmen last night, I was elected to be the second member of said committee. So we're going to be transferring some of our coastal and pond access responsibilities to this new committee. And Jim, I guess the question for you, since there will be a new committee, is, and we would need to think about that as a new committee, is what would you like to be in our harbor management plan this year as supporting recommendations? You may not have a ready answer to that, but it's something to think about. Maybe you'd like to say a few words about what you think the goals of the committee are and what some of the initial actions you'd like to take.
The committee is very straightforward in its charge, that it has an exclusive charge of the access, not just on ponds and coastal, but they wanted to, and I didn't suggest this at all, but they wanted to include any access issues throughout the town.
Mm-hmm.
Someone throws up a fence on someone's property, an easement or something like that, then that we would look at that very carefully. Obviously, the issues that we have right now with the shellfishing is where we'll look, spending a lot of time, and I've been spending a lot of time on it as such. I understand that we'll have, I spoke to 2 people today, that at least 2 other people are filing, so we will be able to have
Good.
an agenda. Elected chairman, who that is we're not sure yet. But in any case, should be functioning by the end of a couple of 3 weeks.
Good.
And incidentally, the Access Committee ties, which is why I'm on this committee, you really can't have one without the other. Access is extremely important for the NRAB.
Yes.
So that's why I decided, with John's prodding, to I had intended on just going on one committee after it was formed, but I'm going to remain at John's request on the NRAB.
Jim, one of the things we did 2 or 3 years ago is we wrote a coastal and pond access report, and we could never quite figure out what to do with it once we wrote it. But I think what I plan to do is to revise that, include it in the harbor management plan, and I think as background, it'd be useful for you to know that particularly Ned Hitchcock and I visited almost every town access site to either the ocean, the harbor, or the bay, and the ponds. So we have a good feeling for what's out there. We discovered some interesting places. We put some signs up, some of which are still there. some of which have disappeared. So I think that would be a useful sort of handoff from us to the new committee.
I think so. I agree.
And that will have some action items in it, some things that we think need to be done. So I'll take that.
Can I put my 2 cents in here for a little bit? Just the,
Yeah.
I noticed what I think it was a recent correspondence about the boathouse access. And we were going back and forth, and I think that there was a meeting a year ago, perhaps, where people were discussing it. Maybe it was the Open Space Committee, and decided that, so this map that we came up with in Town Hall that shows the 1963 town meeting and the fact that it was approved, that there's a little town landing there, and it was all in writing. My understanding is that that was not recorded at the registry. Is that right?
Right, I just sent out a letter to, you should have gotten that, an email with that letter from the attorney that discusses that whole issue. In fact, John, you were the one that found that letter. And
Right, okay,
It was
so
in-
maybe I didn't read that part of it.
Yeah.
So fill me in on what the attorney, what was the decision there?
Well, the decision was that it was never recorded. The town, the town meeting in 1963 approved this plan that they would acquire this property, including a road that goes out to
Right,
that area, which is not exactly the road that everybody drives on now. But at any rate, the attorney said that there was no evidence of the town ever filed this with the land court or any court. And so therefore, they can't really claim ownership to it, I guess, so.
so my first question would be then, how can we reverse that problem? Bring it to town meeting again if we have to and get the thing recorded properly so that it's done.
Well, 50 years have gone by since then, so.
However, my understanding is that between the Aggers who own the property that abuts it.
Well, that's a discussion we've had ongoing here now for several weeks with the Open Space Committee. And I would suggest, John, you maybe just try to get a hold of Bruce Herder and have him go through the discussion we've had. First they wanted to donate the property, and then the Conservation Trust did not want it because it has the boathouse on it, and the Aggers wanted to continue to give the shell fisherman who uses that boathouse access to that property. And it's getting sort of confusing. One of the discussion points was whether the town should grant or be given an easement through there. But then if you look at the actual property and where it ends up, the Aggers really don't own the actual access point to the road. Audubon owns some of that, and it's very confusing. Anyway,
Well,
Bruce is,
yeah, see, all that stuff is legal. I mean, the road that's the proper road to use is still there, and people use it for accessing their property. So you can use the one that nobody uses to get out there, which goes
Yeah.
woods a little bit.
well, one of the concerns that Bruce and others have had is that if such there is a private road that goes down to that point, and if an article comes up in town meetings saying that we want to give easement to the property or something, that the private property owners may just say, like they did over on Field Point, nope, nobody else can come down here. So I don't know.
We had a similar situation, Tom, on Schoolhouse Hills Road, which runs from the road leading down to the sluiceway up to Black Pond Road. And we were involved in a project to repair the culvert that goes over the Herring River, the start of the Herring River between Higgins and Herring Ponds. And back in the mid-50s, there was a lot of stuff on town documents about town meeting approving construction, layout construction, and filing up for ownership of that road. Well, it turns out the filing was never done. And so the ownership of the road then devolves to the current abutters on either side of the road, which happen to be the seashore on one side and some private individuals on the other. And I think the way it would work is that if the town then tried to take that road back, that would be seen by the current owners as a taking, and the town would have to buy it back from them or use eminent domain or something like that.
Mm.
It worries me that there now been 2 cases in town of roads laid out, presumably paid for, and then the town doesn't have the ownership. And that's a waste of town money. It's a waste of our time. Cost us some money to hire a lawyer to sort all this out on Schoolhouse Hill Road. So I hope we don't run across more instances of that.
Sounds like a great project for the new committee.
That's exactly why I brought it up. And, you know, what I'm thinking is that Bruce Herter, I don't know that I know Bruce Herter, but I could contact him by email and we could chat about it. But I think that the best thing to do is come up with a plan for making sure that we can, I mean, this was obviously done in good faith back in 1963. However, there are people that have, I'm sure, bought properties along that road that goes between, you know, the dirt road that you properly use to get there, that you pass people's houses. So they would have something to say about it. And, you know, one of those things where you don't want to make a kerfuffle over the whole issue, but I think it needs to be resolved. And my take on it is whenever there's any access, I've heard this before where people talk about for the use of the shellfishing community. I think it's important that when the town got that town landing, it wasn't meant just to be used as shellfishing. It was meant to be used for anybody in the town to go over there and walk on the beach if they want. So I'd like to kind of make sure that whenever we try to protect ways to the water, that there's some kind of understanding language in there that allows not just shell fishermen or fishermen to go down there, but people that want to go down and walk their dogs or walk on the beach.
John, I totally agree with that philosophy and that's the danger of having each group, or the NRAB, the open space, get into negotiations on access. And eventually you may end up with a list of, well, the Audubon is going to allow this for this committee and that committee. Access is access, except where we're talking about vehicles on the beach, where that is strictly for shellfishing only. But ordinarily, when I deal with access, it's access for everyone. I would not want to be exclusive at all. It worries me to see something given just for the shellfishermen.
Okay, well, you know, so not to exclude the shellfishing community, there it's important too. So I did circulate that list of town landings along with the ones that we had talked about 5 or 8 years ago on the Shellfish Advisory Board. So whenever we meet again, the Shellfish Advisory Board, I believe that will be on the agenda, talking about access points for shellfishing. So we'll see what they've got to say about it and if there's anything new that I don't know.
I've had a message that Tom Flynn had his hand up. Can you, again, Tom, can you unmute yourself at the lower left?
Do you hear me now?
Yes. You have the floor.
At the sluiceway, we had a deed to a road across the site, meaning this site. It didn't category of things that weren't.
You know,
Tom, I can't understand what you're saying.
you're breaking up again, sorry.
I'll have to call on the phone the next time. But anyway, maybe
We
these
have a
mysterious
weak,
deeds.
internet
Is the chat
connection.
function working on this? Could he chat with us?
Or Tom, I'll tell you what, why don't you just, there's a phone number you can call. Why don't you just call the phone number on your phone?
No.
There?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, go ahead without me until I figure out how to get the phone linked with it.
Let's move on to,
Let's get to the meat of the meeting, shall we?
yeah, all right, let's move on to shellfishing. And John Dwayne and Laura, I was wondering if you've gotten to the place where you've got some proposed action items that you'd like to be sure are included in the plan.
I guess I will take, what I know is, I've been talking to Nancy Savetta, me and Laura both, I guess, online. I called Nancy and she's been obviously flat out with doing a lot of stuff to do with clam relays and other kinds of stuff with the, you know, during the summer. However, there's a fellow that provided me some data, Eric Druscott from Division of Marine Fisheries. And he also is flat out doing some stuff to do with aid right now. But anyways, he is going to get me some data. Nancy promised me she would get me some data. And I'm kind of waiting to hear where that, I've tried a few times to start writing a new chapter. And I'm just, I'm not lost, but I'm kind of trying to figure out a way to put it all together. And I really need to have the data first. So I'm waiting to hear what we've got in terms of numbers. And once I have that, then I can start to put it in a form where it's readable. And my only final thought is that I guess it would be helpful to me if I knew what some of the other chapters are going to look like on the new harbor management plan. Because I don't think I'm going to be following exactly the elaborate one that you put together, John, last time. It's going to be a little bit more concise and just strictly the data and what needs to be done and things that we should be watching for.
I like conciseness.
What's
We
that?
had some topics, though, that we'd put together, some general topics.
Yeah, Laura, if you have anything else to say, go ahead.
No, as I said, you and I had put together a little outline with some topics on it, but we were waiting on the data, so.
Yeah, so in order to flesh it out, I really need to see what the numbers say. It's been 15 years. I know that there's a couple of new species, like we've got a good set of bay scallops now. We've got blood clams, which is something new over the last 15 years that's going to be a part of our harvest. So, you know, it's just a matter of getting a lot of the data so that you have something to work with. And then it'll be easier to write the chapter.
John, Laura, I had some notes. Of course, one of the things I'm concerned about is the effects of climate change. And that will mean that the harbor waters will gradually be getting warmer.
Yeah, I'd sent them to you at one point, John. I can find them again and send them.
So, I mean, what I was thinking about is we have to, I know Nancy's concerned with genetic diversity. We have to support that, particularly for cohogs. I think we want to avoid crowding because crowding encourages disease transmission. If you think about what climate change is going to do to Wellfleet Harbor, the water is going to be warmer and the water is going to be deeper because of sea level rise and increased rainfall. And so we're working in a warmer, deeper harbor. At some point, it's going to begin to look like Chesapeake Bay, and they have a very good shellfishing business in Chesapeake Bay. So it's just a question of accommodating to the changes. John and Laura, have you talked with Nancy about the plastics issue?
I don't believe I talked to Nancy about it, no.
I know that the Shellfish Advisory Board is taking some very strong stands about lessening the use of plastics in the business, keeping plastics out of the harbor. But I've never heard any discussion about what can be done about the microplastics which are already there. And have any of you heard any
It was
discussion?
on one of our lists.
It should be part of a new recommendation to measure, you know, microplastics within oysters and clams so that we can have a census to, I mean, until it starts getting to the point at which people can taste them when you're eating them, I don't think it's an issue right now, but it would be nice to keep track of that for the future.
Well, that's a good idea, actually, because I just thought of a possibility. It's possible not to clean up the water over a whole shellfishing bed, but you can imagine picking oysters or picking cohogs and putting them in clean water for a short period of time and see if that flushes the microplastics out. So that would be another experiment that's worth trying. How long do the microplastics stay there if the oyster is living or the cohog is living in clean water?
Well, what kind of clean water? Where would you get the clean water?
There are ways of taking small amounts of seawater and cleaning it up so that there's no microplastics in it.
So you would do it like in a bin?
In a bin of some sort.
Oh,
Yeah.
I get it. All right.
And there are wastewater plants that do this on a very large scale. They coagulate the microplastics and then filter them out. Well, you can't do that over a whole oyster bed, but you can do that over a bin where you put the day's catch in and let it clean itself out. The question is, how quickly does that happen? If it happens in a day or so, you're all right. If it takes a month or so, it won't work.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I have a feeling what happens with them now is that they end up in all the parts of the oysters you don't want to look at anyways, and you just basically swallow them. So it sounds like what we're doing right now is we're disposing of the microplastics through our digestive systems.
Okay.
And if that's
Then where do they go?
acceptable, I wouldn't want to put it in the ad copy that we're sending out about Wellfleet Shellfish. But it's like if that's the function, if that's the way it's functioning now, it may be the way we end up having to keep going with it. You know, reducing the amount of microplastics in the water as a goal would be a recommendation from the shellfishing community, I'm sure.
No, but I have no idea how to do that. Once they're there, it's
Yeah, well, it's got to do with,
it's expensive to get them out on a large scale.
Yeah, I don't think you can, removing them, I'm not sure how, that's fine, if there's a way to do it, so, and on another thing that, well, this is to do with Owen Nichols, it's got to do with the Curley report, but, Owen might have some thoughts on that too, from the Center of Coastal Studies, on how do we figure out what the impact is of microplastics in shellfishing.
Yeah.
John, I just sent you our topics list again, or I can read
Okay.
through it, but,
Thank you. I'll have a look at it, and
okay.
I will respond by sending back my list of suggested actions. Tom, how about dredging? You've already written something, so maybe you could just summarize what you think the key recommendations are.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last time, and I guess the issues aren't so much that we need to do dredging, which everyone knows we need to do periodically, but are there ways that can be that can mitigate the need for as much of it, and how to do it and what to do with it. And so some of the recommendations might be to either fund a grant or ask for a consultation from the Army Corps of Engineers or some expert group that has background in this thin layer deposition of dredge material, and see whether it is feasible for Wellfleet Harbor. We've had a lot of talk about it, and it does seem to work in some places in the South and Louisiana, especially where they're losing all kinds of marshland, but they had some success with this TLD. And we would need some sort of engineering or expertise other than us speculating about it to see if it would actually work, number one. And number two, another recommendation would be to check the feasibility of it through whatever state agencies would have to provide approval. And oops, I'm echoing. Why am I echoing? Anyway.
No, you sound fine to us. We don't get the echo.
Oh, I got it. But it's stop now.
Well,
I'm getting it too.
Well, so then, I mean, that's one issue. The other is defining what the Center for Coastal Studies did with Agnes and her group on analysis of the black male. So getting a definitive report on that, and it's the initial report was that it's not toxic, that there's no, even though it looks and smells bad, I guess it's stuff that could be used to help replenish some of the marsh lands, and so we need more specific information about that. And then we probably need...
2 years ago.
What's that? Did somebody say something?
Yeah, Tom started to speak and we lost him again.
That was 2 years ago. Let's move something.
Well, yeah, it wasn't, okay, whatever. That they're supposed to be reporting that out. And John, you had something from her on that, didn't you, or not? Maybe not.
Let me answer that question by talking about a little larger vision. I met a couple days ago with Hilary Lemos and John Portnoy, and we were looking at Mayo Creek restoration issues, but we also talked about the possibility of doing a study which would model the effect of restoring Mayo Creek and removing the railroad dike, which crosses Duck Creek down around Mac Shack, on sediment deposition. And as part of that discussion, we all wondered, well, where was the report from the Center for Coastal Studies that Agnes Mittermeier has written? So I sent her an email, and I was told I would get a final copy this week.
Uh-huh.
We've had a draft for a while, so I think the basic conclusion is still that it's even though this black mayonnaise or black custard, as Agnes calls it, smells bad, it's not actually harmful. The smell is just normal hydrogen sulfide, which lots of harbors have. The other thing that's happened, Tom, is the trustees of reservations, which is an statewide conservation organization, is doing a lot of work on marsh restoration up at the Great Marsh in Newburyport, which is 20,000 acres, which is order of magnitude larger than the marshes we have. And I read in one of their reports of some equipment that was being used for thin layer deposition. So evidently there's some practical experiments going on in Massachusetts. So I will go get some more information about that.
Okay.
I think the concept is an easy one. What we have to do is convince people that there's actually a practical way to do it. So that's why I was pleased to see this reference. The other thing I need to do, Tom, and I've been saying I'm going to do it for the past month, I need to get on with it, is I need to find out what the material is like that's in the federal channel, the channel that runs right down the harbor. And I think that's mostly sand. And if so, the question then arises, well, do we have a need around the harbor to deposit the sand rather than sending it back out to the middle of Cape Cod Bay? But I need to get a report from the harbor master office to do that.
Okay.
John, if you would excuse me, I'm going to have to leave the meeting as I think you're aware my granddaughter is living with us. My wife is in Springfield with her 93-year-old mother, and I'm the chief guy around here, and she's getting hungry, and I've got to start thinking about that. So I'm going to have to
Hungry grandchildren
father's
always have precedence. So thanks for. I'll update you on what when you see the notes, what we've talked about.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, Jim.
My main issue has been climate change, and I've come to an interesting conclusion as I've been looking at some of the data on sea level rise and temperature rise due to climate change. And the conclusion is that we're not going to see much change over the next 10 years, which is the lifetime of this harbor management plan we're writing about. So I think we can.
My thoughts on that, John, are we still should note, I mean, when it comes to one of the things for inclusion into the shellfishing chapter, I was thinking about if there's a way to measure acidity, get good baselines, even if it's just 10 years down the road, how things have changed. Because if we start now, then 50 years down the road, we could probably see some market, I won't be, but other people would see some market changes in temperatures, salinity, pH, everything.
But the point is, we have 10 years to get stuff done and to get ourselves ready. And that's also a message not only about salt marshes, but it's a message about the town needing to prepare itself for storms and high water. Laura, are you hearing us?
I'm back. My connection blew up, but I'm back.
Okay, welcome back. You'll be interested in the list of all the stuff we assigned to you.
Good.
So there's a lot of monitoring. We have to monitor harbor tides, marsh elevations, boundaries of marshes, because I'm concerned about storms affecting marshes, effective groundwater rise on septics. There is, the town of Wellfleet has a major project on town resilience due to climate change that is shared with the towns of Eastham, Truro, and Provincetown. And I've talked to Hillary about that. There's a significant effort going on about shoreline resilience and protection. So in effect, some of the things that we might have proposed are already underway. There's also a young scientist working for Mass Audubon who's doing some monitoring on the Mass Audubon marshes. So I think we can have a very strong set of proposals to get some monitoring done, to get some plans in place, because we have some time to do it. But if we wait 10 years and don't do anything, the next 10 years after 2030, things are going to begin to get hairy. I guess, John, Dwayne, anything more on the Curley report? The Curley report.
No, Owen, I shot Owen Nichols another email today or yesterday, I forget, and I have not heard back from him, just to kind of ask if we're in the queue for, where we're at, because I don't think we actually have a plan yet with the Center for Coastal Studies, so until he gets us something to proceed ahead, we're where we've been for the last 4 months.
I'm a little less discouraged than you are, John. Owen is doing some work on fish this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Water quality, the Center for Coastal Studies, excuse me, takes data several times a year, and they have been doing this for the past 10 or 15 years, not only in Wellfleet Harbor, but all around Cape Cod Bay.
So
the Audubon has been doing work on terrapins and horseshoe crabs. I think they could be encouraged to do some work on birds. So the main thing we have to do actually is to monitor the health of the shellfish population.
And finfish.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Finfish, shellfish. I think finfish are important. We're all talking about some of the stuff like the eelgrass beds out on the other side of Billingsgate. So, and I'm not sure, is he still doing work for Friends of Herring River? Is he still in the middle of that, or is that done?
What Owen's doing?
His report for Friends of Herring River, wasn't he doing,
He's working. We have not had a report.
okay, so he's
Still
still,
working.
he's still doing stuff for them in the harbor, around the dike, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, right.
All right.
I'm,
Well, I'm sure he's, you know, it's just that, that's one of the things that we, I think in order to figure out what he's going to be able to do, he's going to do a lot of the measuring of stuff in the harbor. And so we haven't quite figured out how that's all going to work. You know, when you look at the original, when you look at the Curley report, a lot of it was fairly labor intensive with beach seining and otter trawls. So I don't know what's going to be done or what the schedule would be for that. So really my update on the Curley report is the fact that I'm kind of waiting to see what Owen would put forth for proposal and what he would want to include. I've again put it on the agenda for the Shellfish Advisory Board whenever we meet again, what they would think would be important. So, you know, I don't really have much of an update. The only update I have is that I'm just kind of waiting to hear back from Owen, and I'm sure he's probably doing a lot of stuff in Wellfleet Harbor right now that maybe would help us in our efforts, but we don't have a plan yet for a new Curley report.
okay. We may not get, it's not clear what we're going to get from Owen until we have to put our draft together. So we may have to do this ourselves.
I have a feeling that we're going to end up combining a new Curley report with a harbor management plan. And it's
Yeah.
sort of one and the same thing, you know?
I had a couple of thoughts, John. One for yourself and Laura, very specifically. When we're putting together the Curley report and looking at shellfish populations, if I look at the old Curley report, they only looked at shellfish populations that were near the coast in the mud flats. But there's a lot of dragging going on now in shellfish in the harbor for shellfishing. So we need to sample not only on the flats, but in the deep water as well.
Well, and surf clams, which I believe are on the other side, they're in the bay, technically.
Yeah. The other thing I've been thinking about is we may have to raise some money ourselves, write some proposals to some funding organizations, for example, to do a renewed Curley report.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, what we have been done in the past is make a recommendation to the town and hope somebody does something. And I think we have to be we have to learn to be more proactive in the future and get things done ourselves.
Yeah, you can make all kinds of recommendations. If no one acts on them, then what's the point?
On the other hand, three of the recommendations that I wanted to emphasize is that there's, based on the previous harbor management plan, there's actually a fair bit going on. We made a lot of noise 12 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was, about nitrogen in the harbor waters. And we've got the Comprehensive Wastewater Planning Committee working on that. And they're finally getting close to actually having a plan. We said we should restore some of our impaired marshes. And we've got work going on about the Herring River and Mayo Creek. And we said we ought to get dredging done. And it's going to start, as I understand, this winter. So some of the recommendations have taken place. I just think that looking at some of the things we're talking about now, we're gonna have to go get money for some of it ourselves. It's not gonna happen just by chance. And that's be a bit of difference to the
However,
way we walked in the past.
yeah, and I'm clueless when it comes to who approach. I mean, I could have got some suggestions, but I think one of the things is we need to have, before you ask for money, you want to know how much you're asking for and what it's for. And I think that's where Owen's going to help out with that.
Well, Owen can help. Also, Hillary is very good at that. She knows a lot of places where the money is available. And so we could go talk to her and say, we want to do this bit of the Curley report. Well, where should we go? And I think we'd get some pretty good answers. John, Laura, I think you guys are doing a good bit of work. The place in this report where I'm most worried is what we say about shellfishing. So I think it's very important to set up either a follow-up joint meeting with the Shellfishing Board, or make sure that Nancy comes to our next meeting, and so we can work through exactly what's important, what the shellfishing community would like to see, what we would like to see, so we can get that wrapped up a bit. So we won't be able to meet again till late September, and I hope we could find a good way to figure out when we could get Nancy to join us is to look for the tides and suggest to me some times to hold a meeting at high tide.
She told me it doesn't matter. She goes, she can budget an hour or two for us for a meeting with no problem.
Well, maybe we could also get Dave Seitler or somebody like that if we if we said, look, it's high tide. I know that when I was running the Mayo Creek Restoration Committee, Jake Puffer and Pat Winslow were on it, and they're both shell fishermen, and so every meeting time was scheduled for high tide, and that worked out.
Except, I think Dave works in the deep water.
I knew that, and I don't know how he schedules himself. He probably just goes out when he needs to.
Well,
But maybe we could get somebody else from the committee. But I think it's something that it would help us if we could have this in September. That would, I think, solidify some of the things.
okay, I'm still waiting to hear when the Shellfish Advisory Board is going to meet again. It's probably going to be mid-September, but I haven't heard yet. The Shellfish, Dave looks like he doesn't want to be chair anymore of that board. So we're undergoing some changes on the Shellfish Advisory Board, and I don't know what they're going to be. So that's just kind of an FYI. There might be some changes undergoing.
Okay.
You know, I don't know who's going to end up being the chair over there. And but sometime in the middle of September, I expect there to be a Shellfish Advisory Board meeting, and I do expect that this chapter on shellfishing is going to be included on the agenda for what they may want to have included in it, and who might want to attend another meeting.
Well, if that's going to be on their agenda, if you let's see, we're back in town. I can tell you we're going to be up in Maine, assuming we pass a COVID test.
They're going to let you in, huh, John?
We will be back in town on the 12th of September. And so if there's a Shellfish Advisory Board meeting anytime after that, I would like to join you, and maybe we can wrap everything up at the Shellfish Advisory meeting.
I will let you know when it's going to be.
Okay. Is there anything else that we could need to talk about? I think we're about ready to wrap it up. I will try in the future to have these meetings early in the morning, 8:30, 9 o'clock, because if the meeting is on during office hours, then Courtney Butler is here to help troubleshoot problems. But we lost Tom Flynn, which is too bad. And that's not good procedure. We ought to be all loud and clear all the time. And so I'll try to be sure we do morning meetings, assuming people can come, and so we have somebody who knows what they're doing in the background.
I have a feeling, John, that Tom Flynn might be a bad reception area where he is.
Where does Tom live?
That's a good question. I don't know. If he lives over by D&D Market, where the gas station is there. It's a tough area.
Well, maybe that's the case, but then there's always a call-in option. So how do you do that?
You just call in.
Yeah, well, call in. Yeah, but you need a number.
Yeah, but you need, unless he's got a hard line at his house, he's calling in on a cell phone. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, but what does he call in to?
There's a phone number. So when Courtney sends around the Zoom meeting info, whenever
Oh,
there's
there's a phone number.
Yeah, you can access just by phone. You just won't see everybody.
There's a phone link down there, so you can call in as opposed to being on video.
I'll make sure that Tom knows that the next time.
All right.
So I guess we're done. Thank you. Have
Thanks,
a good
John.
Thanks,
evening.
John.
And we'll be together again in September.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Buenas
Bye.
noches.